Hi there, this is Sean, the Honest Book Reviewer, with another book review. In this video, we're discussing a book by one of my favourite authors of all time, Robert Goddard. The book's called This Is the Night They Come For You. If I wasn't already a fan of Goddard, I don't know that I'd pick this book up to read based on the cover. The cover for me is just pretty poor, pretty ordinary. And it doesn't really give us an idea of what the book's about. The blurb does, of course, on the back. The blurb's quite long and detailed, so I won't even go into that. But from the cover, it doesn't inspire me to want to read this book. Goddard usually is a reliable author. In his books, you get great characters, great plot, great pacing, great twists, sometimes a bit of historic element. All those things make his books such a great read. I was expecting that in this book. Did Goddard deliver? Let's find out. The standout thing about this book is the historic element. Goddard did a great job in bringing us the history of Algeria into this novel, and the history of Algeria and France, and how France used to control Algeria. It was a colony of France, I think, at one stage, and then how Algeria won its independence, and then what happened after it was independent, the corruption, the crime, people being killed, all that sort of thing going on, the military coup later on. That's all mentioned in this novel. And we also get a feeling about how Algeria is in the present day. They're still recovering from that history to them, even things that happened 40, 50 years ago, are still fresh in the mind of the people of Algeria. That's so strong in this novel. The historic element is the strongest part, and that's not usually the case in these novels. Usually the plot, the pacing, the characters, the twists are the strongest part, but they either fall into the shadows or are non-existent in this novel. I was hoping for those strong twists. The whole time I was waiting to get my hands on this book, I was just imagining what kind of twists there would be in this novel, especially from that title, This Is the Night They Come For You. That title just evokes so many different things in my imagination. But when I read this book, as I was going through it, and even when I finished it, I just couldn't relate the title to the book or the plot. I couldn't find the connection, and I still can't find it now. Maybe I'm missing the obvious, I'm not sure, but I just don't understand the title of the book and how it relates to what the book's about. It doesn't mean anything to me. There's nothing in the book that makes me think of the title. The main plot of this book is built around a murder that happened 50 years ago from the present day timeline of the novel. And the present day timeline is in modern times, very contemporary. We get mention of COVID outbreaks and how people are coping with that and how countries cope with that. So we know this novel is set in very modern times. A man called Stephen Gray, who's I think in his 60s, he's surprised by the visit of a woman that he knew when she was a young girl. She brings him an evidence, a confession that her father wrote and hid in his apartment when he was living in Algeria. It details his history, his life, but also the death of his then girlfriend, who was the sister of this man, Stephen Gray, and she was killed 50 years ago. And Stephen Gray has never forgotten that. He's always wanted to know what happened to his sister. There's also links to two powerful men in Algeria, and they're linked to this other man's confession and history. These two men ended up holding powerful positions in the Algerian government, and they were both corrupt as well. Two of the men were involved in crimes and killings and brutal things that happened in Algeria. One was put in prison, one escaped from the country. The one that was put in prison is released and he's quite unwell, and everybody thinks that he will just stay in his house and not leave and he won't be a bother, but he vanishes, so he escapes from his house, and this becomes a manhunt for him. These two threads in the story are very closely aligned, and they have a lot of touch points as the story goes on. Because the man who was put in prison wants revenge on the man who escaped. Because the man who escaped with a lot of money, tens of millions of dollars, and the man who was put in prison wants some of that action. As readers, we know more about what's going on in this book than the characters do. So Superintendent Taleb and Agent Hidalchi, the two people who are trying to track down this man who vanished from Algeria recently, they don't know how closely aligned this is to the story of Stephen Gray's sister. Stephen Gray doesn't really understand everything about how his sister's death is tied in to these powerful men in Algeria, and he doesn't know that there's Secret Service agents and there's police officers who are trying to track down the man who's escaped from Algeria. So it's all very complex. There's a complex web going on. That's interesting to a degree, but we expect a lot from a Robert Goddard novel. We expect great characters, great pacing, and great twists. Those three elements have to be there. They're not there in this plot. So the characters, even though they're good, they're not great. None of the characters really engage me that much. Goddard tried his best, but for me, they're not really engaging. The pacing of this novel is just really slow. There are too many slow parts, and you have to get to about the last 100 pages before you get a change in that pacing and becomes a little bit more exciting. But it is a long slog to get to that last 100 pages. And in those last 100 pages, it's not all exciting. It doesn't make up for it enough. Superintendent Taleb is an okay character. Definitely not one of Goddard's best. He's almost one-dimensional. He's got some light and shade, not very much. And I wasn't really engaged in this character at all, which is a shame because it's one of the main characters in this book. I recently read another book by Goddard, and it was another new book, and it's called The Fine Art of Invisible Detection, and I did a video on that book, which is on my channel. The main character in the other book is brilliant, one of the best characters I've read for a long time, and it's a shame that Goddard couldn't create another brilliant character for this book. Stephen Gray, the man who's trying to track down the truth of what happened to his sister 50 years ago, is a better character in my opinion. And it's a shame that he's a better character because he's thrown into the background a bit. His story isn't given as much prominence as the storyline of Superintendent Taleb and Agent Hidalchi. I liked the Stephen Gray character. I like the fact that he's just trying his best to make the most of what he's got in life, but he also wants to hold on to his sister's memory and find out the truth. He's very resilient. He's got a few little secrets of his own, and we find that out as the novel goes on. So as a character, he's got that complexity. He's hiding a little bit, and we get the feeling that he only gives a little bit away to other people in the story, and he only gives the whole truth away when he's forced to. Agent Hidalchi is a better character than Superintendent Taleb. I get the feeling this is Goddard's attempt at creating the female badass character, but I think he tried a bit too hard. There are some moments where it's not believable. She does have some light and shade, and she does have some growth as the storyline goes on. More growth than Taleb does. Not as much growth as Stephen Gray, but more than Taleb. So that made her a slightly better character, but still not enough to be a real standout character, and it didn't fully engage me as much. In my opinion, this novel would have been better if we didn't have the two police officers and we had Stephen Gray as the main character trying to find out the truth, because that's Goddard's strength. Goddard's strength is giving us the everyday person thrown into a situation that's out of their control, but they're trying to get by, and they do things to get by. They do those extraordinary things. I don't know that Goddard is good at writing police characters. It didn't come across that way in this novel. That's not his strength. I expected a lot from this novel, and I don't think that my expectations were set too high because Goddard is usually so reliable. I was disappointed by this novel, and I rated it a 2 out of 5. Definitely not the best Goddard novel that I've read, and I was hoping after reading The Fine Art of Invisible Detection that was published in 2021, I was hoping that this book that was published in 2022 would be just as good or even better. Unfortunately, it wasn't. I'm hoping that this is just a blip in Goddard's literary canon, and the next book in his career is much better. If you're interested in Goddard novels, I do review quite a few of his books on my channel. The videos are in the thriller section. If you're interested in other thriller authors, check out my channel and why not subscribe? Also check out the thriller playlist. It should be on your screen now.